Okay, everybody.
This is where we catch up with each other.
I'm sure he
every year.
gives us a Q&A, right?
This is a roundtable discussion surrounding the legal issue of driving testing for cannabis as it stands in the country. We have on the far end, I don't actually second one, David Ettershank.
I'm Sue Higginson.
No, you're
Jeremy Buckingham.
and where are you from? Who do you represent?
I represent the Legalised Cannabis Party New South Wales.
I'm also Sue Higginson.
Pass the mic.
I'm also Sue Higginson, but I'll also go by the name of David Ettershank, Legalised Cannabis Victoria.
And I'm Stephen Lawrence. I'm a Labor member of the Legislative Council with Jeremy, State Upper House.
I'm Lachlan Hall. I'm a local regional organiser for Young Labor in the region.
I'm Cate Faehrmann. I'm in the State Upper House. I'm the Greens spokesperson on drug law reform. You can talk about Susan.
Brian Walker, and I'm in the State Upper House in Western Australia, legalised cannabis.
I'm Sue Higginson until she gets here.
Pass that back. There's two active microphones, so you can share them. Okay.
All right, keep that one. You guys take that one.
Sure.
Okay. 4, 3.
That one.
All right, start. You will. I don't know how you're going to start. So.
Who's chairing it?
I don't know.
David was.
David. Someone.
Yeah, he's chairing it.
Oh, okay,
Oh.
go, David.
Look, welcome everyone. I'm Sue, and I'm chairing this session. It's an extraordinary opportunity to have, some of the leading voices in the area of drug driving law reform here. We've spent a lot of time at MardiGrass already saying these laws are shit, and I think that that's probably a starting point for most people. So really, where we want to go to now is how are we going to get more change through? Where are we going from here? To get something really happening in this space. I think we've done to death how horrible it is for a lot of people in the community to be using medicinal cannabis, often on a prescription, and not being able to drive without fear of losing their license and effectively perhaps losing their jobs, losing their family connections, losing their ability to travel, losing their ability to care properly for their kids. So we've done that. But where are we going to go from now? How are we going to achieve change in this area? And maybe that's where we want to start with the roving, with the mics. Let's start from the end and work our way down.
Yes, the laws are crap. They need to be changed. There's been inquiries chaired by Cate, inquiries chaired by me. Stephen Lawrence has been on those. Parliamentary inquiries have heard a lot of evidence that the roadside drug testing regime is not fit for purpose. We've had that out of the mouth of the Premier of New South Wales just a couple of weeks ago, saying they're committed to change. So we now get down to, for me, the details of what that change looks like. A big part of the opposition, essentially in New South Wales, to it came from two main agencies, the Centre for Road Safety or Transport, who oversee the road rules. They told a lot of lies for a long time about the link between cannabis and road accidents. We were able to pull that apart and essentially show that probably there's a net benefit of people on who need cannabis, having that cannabis and driving on the road. And like millions of Australians have consumed cannabis, millions consume it regularly, and there's not a big spike. There hasn't been a big spike in the road toll as people took up medicinal cannabis, or a change really associated with cannabis. It's less than 1% of fatal road accidents might be ascribed to cannabis use, but there's a whole other range of factors in there. What I would say is where we're up to now is the other big agency is the New South Wales Police. And what they are concerned about is themselves. They've wanted to maintain this RDT regime because it's their turf and they defend it. It's their budget. It's high visibility policing. They get to hassle communities about prohibition generally. That's what they do here. But now that the conversation has moved on, they want to protect themselves and sort of indemnify themselves from, you know, any responsibility if they wave someone through who's got a prescription, isn't impaired. So they're really negotiating around what's called their standard operating procedures. When they're arresting someone, doing a drug raid, RDT, the SOPs are what the cops use. And so they want to have a regime that they can rely on, that has some scientific credibility about getting someone having a test, a range of tests, and then allowing them to drive on or be prosecuted if they don't have a prescription or not. And that's where we're up to now, and I'm hoping that we can resolve that with the cops, with the government, in just the coming days. And that's New South Wales.
In Victoria, we had a real surprise when we first got elected started in the beginning of 23, when Dan Andrews, the Premier at the time, sort of came out in a press conference and basically was asked a question, which we organised, from the media about medicine driving. And he said, yeah, this is a really important thing. I was the Minister for Health when we introduced Medcam, and we're going to fix that in the coming months. And then he came out and he said it again a couple of weeks later, and then he said it again a third time in public. And we're like, oh shit, we're going to rock this one in. And then, I don't know, we sort of got kidnapped by aliens or something, and lost all interest. We kept on campaigning, and in the end we got to a situation where the government, out of the blue, announced a world-first closed-track driving trial, which was basically a triumph of marketing over science. So they would pay for some cars by Swinburne with tracking on, and we'd bring people in, blah, 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 blah. And it was nothing particularly unique other than I think it was in a closed track. The other one though, which was really, really good, and one of the reasons why we didn't sort of kick the shit out of them, was they said what we will do is we will test different impairment technologies. And that was like magic, you know, let's face it, like the nub issue in all of this is presence versus impairment. Anyway, they promised that it'll all be done by, actually next month, and all finished, done and dusted for Parliament to consider before it goes to election. Needless to say, the government has an unlimited capacity for disappointment. First of all, the closed track driving trial isn't anywhere near closed. It's not anywhere finished, so they're going to have an announcement sometime next year after the next election. And the second thing which really pissed us off is because of limited budget, they didn't do the testing of the impairment testing technologies. So they dropped that. So it literally was just a bucket of cold set from our point of view. That said, the one thing we did get done was, I guess, not so much a defence, but an exemption. So we held hostage a piece of legislation the government was desperate to get to, and it desperately needed our 2 votes. And in return, what we got was a situation where magistrates would no longer have to automatically cancel a licence. If you got impaired, you wouldn't get a conviction, you wouldn't whatever, you know, it would give them discretion to decide what to do. And that was combined with undertakings from the Labor Party on transcript as to how this was to be interpreted. The net effect now is, in Victoria, if you're just caught with presence, so this does not cover impaired driving, just presence, then you can rock up to the magistrate will say, are you on medicinal cannabis? Yes, here's my script. And then they'll turn to the copper and say, can you prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that this driver was not complying with their doctor's directions when they were picked up? Which of course they can't do. And the net result is, with the exception of I think a couple of cases where people have had multiple charges, like running a red light and whatever else, everyone's walked. There's been no conviction recorded, no fine, they've kept their licence. Now this is an interim measure pending the result of the closed track driving trial, but of course we're thinking it's going to be pretty hard to walk backwards. The other one which is more important I think as well is for the police themselves. The police prosecutors are getting increasingly pissed off at going into court and losing, and it costs us days and days and thousands of dollars. I think there was 58,000 hours of police time was spent last year on personal possession and driving. So we are thinking that this will hopefully achieve a level of attitudinal change with the cops. If you're just there, you're just presence, there's nothing else, we think it's going to get to the point where they're just going to go, oh, look, stuff it, it's not worth it. We've just got to work our way through this backlog of, or this stocked pile of 480,000 swipe sticks that they've got. So that's pretty much where we're up to. Not a satisfactory outcome, but at least we've broken the nexus between presence and impairment, and that's a really big thing. And we actually have a way where now we've got people going in there and they're getting off. It's a shit, they've got to go to the mags to do this, but it's a work in progress.
Thank you. Yeah, so look, I agree the current laws are shit, and was very happy to hear the Premier announce that there's an appetite for reform in this area. As people are probably going to know, we've got this very contradictory and unsatisfactory situation where we do roadside testing for a number of illegal drugs. We don't do any roadside testing by and large for prescription drugs. So you've got people on Valium, people on benzos, etc., and we rely upon their doctors giving them good advice and then following that advice. So that inconsistency where you've got 1 million prescriptions for medicinal cannabis but not treating that substance in the same way as this wide range of other drugs is really, I think, unsustainable. So this is an incredibly important bit of law reform, and I come at it, I guess, as a criminal lawyer for 20 years before being in Parliament, where I basically learnt the lesson that one of the worst things you can do as a society is involve people in the criminal justice system in an unnecessary way, because the very fact of being involved in the criminal justice system is harmful in a whole range of ways. So we don't want laws that needlessly criminalise people. So we've got a situation here where we have a regime for other prescription drugs. We can craft, I think, a satisfactory way of applying it to cannabis, where people have a prescription and are getting doctor's guidance. There is some complexities here, and we do know that cannabis, particularly when it's used in conjunction with alcohol or other substances, plays a role in traffic accidents and harm on the road. But we also know that in jurisdictions where they've moved to an exemption for medicinal cannabis, there has not been an increase in harm. So we've got a whole lot of people, and there's probably people in this category sitting here in this tent, who are trying to comply with the criminal law, are restricted in their ability to drive. That restriction is a really difficult one to work with because, unlike alcohol, there is not a reliable rule of thumb for cannabis. You can't necessarily know if you're going to hit that threshold of it being detected in your saliva. So people's lives are being interfered with in a really significant way, and they're being criminalised. So it's fantastic news. The Premier Chris Minns has announced an appetite for reform in this area. There's work going on in government, as I understand, looking at things like impairment testing. Where's the technology at? Is what's being done in America potentially applicable here? And how will that work in terms of the practicalities of someone who's pulled over, who's positive, who's got a prescription? What's the next step to work out if they might be impaired and might not be fit to be on the road? So I see this as an incredibly important issue because, like medicinal cannabis, it's a beachhead to reform because we need to keep our eye on the full legalisation of cannabis, because that ultimately is, I think, the only way to regulate drugs that is consistent with human rights and human dignity, and I think this is an incredibly important part of it. But we can't lose sight of the road safety issues, not least because you'll never get a community mandate to reform this area and to legalise cannabis, like has happened in so many parts of the world, if you can't address that core issue of community safety. So yeah, the government's open to reform, the government's working on it, and we need to satisfy those issues, I think.
Thank you. So the government's working on it, but how do we get them to work on it faster? We have shit laws, but shit laws can be changed. And from my experience, we live in a democracy, but it's not enough for people to just vote. People need to get more involved, and the real power of the democratic system that we have is that people can be involved with the parties of their choice. And it's not enough that it's great that we have these events like here in Nimbin that create this want for reform, that give spaces for discussion, that energize people, but it's not enough that people just come to Nimbin, smoke a joint for the weekend, and then go off, and that's sort of the end of their discussions or the end of their work. Change can only happen with a popular mandate from the people, and that only happens when the people are motivated enough to get involved with a system which is much more accessible than it appears to be. The system is designed to look inaccessible so that people don't decide to get into it, but once you get into it, it is much more accessible than you might realize, and then actually make changes within that. Now, drug road testing reforms are such a massive thing because as a young person in the region, I see how quickly the cycle of poverty goes on when someone doesn't have a driver's license. If you live in the region, especially a region like this, with the degradation of public transport over decades now, if you're a young person without a driver's license, you can't get a job. If you can't get a job, you can't pay for rent in the middle of a housing crisis. If you can't pay for rent, you can't pay for groceries, you can't feed yourself, you can't have a shower, and it's just a massive cycle, and it's so difficult to get out of. And young people who have serious medical conditions, whether that's anxiety or depression, that they've been prescribed cannabis to treat those conditions, they then can't get a job if they have their medicine so that they can actually integrate with society, but then can't drive for 48 hours. That massively limits their ability to engage with society on any level at any form. And this needs to be changed, and it needs to have been changed yesterday, but it needs a popular front of people who don't just leave the reforms at their locations so they come to talk about it, but they go out and take active roles within their communities to make that change.
So I'm the Greens member on the panel, and in the New South Wales Upper House, in fact in the New South Wales Parliament, it's important to know that we could pass good drug laws tomorrow. We could pass laws that regulated cannabis, for example, that fixed drug driving laws tomorrow. Why? Because the Labor government actually has the numbers in terms of the lower house and the independents, all Greens, that would support them in the lower house. I'm in the upper house. The Labor government knows that they can support, they can rely on the 4 Greens MPs in the upper house, for 1 legalised cannabis party person and at least a few others, right, to pass the bills. So I'm kind of sitting here. It'll be good to keep the discussion up because I have to be a little bit contrarian about this because we've got less than a year out to the election. The drug summit was held, 1.5 years ago, I think. Yeah, 1.5 years ago now. The government, Labor, even before the election, said that they recognised the problem of the fact that our drug driving laws haven't kept up with the change in medicinal cannabis becoming legal. How many years ago is it now? Yeah, okay, 10 years ago, for goodness sake. So we absolutely know what the issue is. Labor knew what it was, said so in Parliament, said it's an issue. Kicked it off to the Drug Summit. Drug Summit kicks it off to expert panels, and now we're hearing maybe something's going to happen in a few days. I don't trust them, actually. I don't trust them. I don't trust the Labor government to do it. I really hope it happens. But coming back as well to what lots of people have said and continue to say, I'm saying this because we can't let up. We can't kind of sit back and hear a promise. I think the Victorian situation has shown that a little bit. That we can't just expect the Minns government to do it. And one of the key reasons why is, unfortunately, I'm sure Stephen agrees with this, we've got although you might not admit it today here now, but we do have Chris Minns kind of responds to the Daily Telegraph front page, and he responds to 2GB, and the Daily Telegraph does not like the reform to the drug driving laws, right? They have started a campaign against it. The Libs have jumped on board. The Libs are starting to go super hard to anybody on the issue, asking ministers in budget estimates, so they're on the attack. So all of this looks to me, frankly, as though Chris means, because he doesn't want bad publicity. He's riding high in the polls. Why would he do it, right? So I certainly hope I'm wrong, but I just say don't rest on our laurels. Now is the time, if they are really finalising stuff, to just ramp up all of your contacts with MPs. All of the campaign that you do, go to my website as well. I've got an email campaign as well. I'm sure others do in New South Wales. If we're that close, now's the time to really increase your efforts, and let's hope we're back here next year after the state election. And we've actually, we're not seeing the ridiculous boys and girls in blue, which we've seen out, every single road coming into Nimbin this weekend, because it's ridiculous. It's got to stop, and it's got to stop this year in New South Wales.
Now, from the Wild West, I'm going to give a little bit of a different perspective just now, because there's a few truths out there. First of all, you can't trust politicians, you can't trust the government of the day, because they don't really want to serve the people. They've got other ulterior motives. And people aren't going to speak about that, but that's the reality of it. Truth matters nothing. I've said this ad nauseum. Truth matters nothing at all for the political machinery. However, it's also true, and we all feel this right now, things are changing. There's a bubbling going on. There's an increasing level of dissatisfaction, not just with cannabis, but so many other ways that the government is actually not serving the people. And I'm not going to be specific which government, because all governments are not serving the people. And with that, we also then know it is inevitable that the driving laws will change. It is inevitable. This will be happening, and I think the speed of change is approaching now. We have the Tasmanian example, no increase in harm. We've got the ACT, no increase in harm there at all. We've got evidence from all over the world that with one or two exceptions perhaps, but things generally settle down, that legalising cannabis does not result in increased deaths or harm on the roads. So what are we in Western Australia doing? Well, what happened is back in 2021, I led the Select Committee on Cannabis and Hemp, which produced a report. And the report made 19 recommendations, of which the government accepted 17, and only one of them was going to act on, the THC driving laws, because they know that we have a lie enshrined in law. This is quick. They know that they are supporting a lie in the legislation. This cannot be accepted. They know this. So what do? They said, well, we'll set up a working group. Now, they only set up a working group if they know they're going to get the result at the end of it, because otherwise it's a waste of time. So a working group to give them breathing space. In that time, in Western Australia, I suspect they've been preparing actually a legislative response. Back in February, I was promised by behind the chair in the conversations, we will like the changes they're producing for us. We're going to really like what they're doing. They haven't said what they're going to do, but it's on the minister's desk, the health minister's desk, and she signed it to move on to cabinet. And then it was sent to another minister, the Minister for Police, to sign and send to cabinet. And the Minister for Police kept it on his desk for 2 months. Didn't sign it. He was looking for his pen. It was hard to find, maybe stolen. And so that I spat the dummy at that stage, and now the government knows that they're going to have to actually struggle to get legislation through the upper house. And I'm very happy with that. And I promise I'm going to oppose every single bill coming through until they make this actually happen. Because it's ready, it's prepared. I expect we're going to have an announcement soon, and they're going to announce the legislative change. I think we're going to like it. It may not be perfect, but it's going to be better than what we have now. And that's actually, I would actually bet a lot of money on this. It's inevitable, it's happening, and it's only a matter of time. And it could be days or weeks so that before the government puts an announcement out. The second good thing happening in Western Australia is I am probably going to be appointed the chair of a select committee on work impairment. Now, this means that we can talk about how do we check for impairment, both at work but also elsewhere. Not just cannabis, but all drugs, and indeed things like sleep deprivation, a whole host of other causes for work impairment. So progress is being made, change will happen. The question is only, is it a matter of days, weeks, months, before the politicians finally get their act together?
Wow. Well, we are going somewhere. And can I just say, I think Michael Balderstone is still here, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong. But one thing that does really give me hope is I think this is the first panel we've had at MardiGrass for at least 20 years where we've had Labor Party people coming here and speaking about drug law reform.
Yeah.
I think the last one, and it could be that there's an election, and it could be also that there are people who are prepared to put their head up above the parapet.
He is one of the good ones.
And that is, I think the last person, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, the last Labor person we had here was Meredith Bergman. God rest her soul. But that she came for about 5 years in a row.
Is she still alive?
Is she still alive? Okay, she's still alive.
Very much so. What a story.
Yeah, well, it's Monty Python-esque. I'm not dead yet. I'm just resting. So, great. Okay, I'm in trouble, but that is, no, but seriously, this...
Thank you, Lachlan, for getting Stephen here. He's our future.
Yeah, and so we really do see that as a sign of hope. And Cate, yes, it is an election year, and maybe there's part of it, but that's our chance. And really, you know, I think the message is we do have to do more than come to festivals. But what a brilliant festival this is. I mean, this is the only festival in Australia that has as its heart a change to law. I mean, that's what we're all here for. So, I also think that the sinister nature of the drug driving laws is seen visibly here. You know, the fact that they are putting this town under siege, rather than policing all the other things that we need policing, let alone, as Cate put on a post this week, let alone terrorism, for which they, were just slammed for underestimating. And here they are, hundreds of police, every entrance, and shame on them. Shame.
Well said, Sue.
So, well said, Sue. Yeah, go Sue. Okay, so that's great. Let's open it up to questions. And I did describe yesterday that the definition of impossibility is to get a question, not a statement, out of an audience at MardiGrass. But we'll try. We'll continue to try.
I was wondering if there would be like some way of approaching the problem from the people that make the test, being senior police owning the company and the main shareholder being the police superannuation fund, that perhaps that could be proven to be a conflict of interest.
Jeremy.
Yeah, that clearly is a conflict of interest. Yeah, and the Draeger test is a piece of shit. It doesn't work. You get false negatives, false positives. I took the extraordinary action, and I rang up the roads minister that actually brought in roadside drug testing in 2006, Eric Roosendahl. I don't know if anyone remembers Eric Roosendahl, and good thing if we don't, because he got a $10,000 car off Idio Bead and ended up at ICAC. But anyway, he brought in this regime, and he was told by the cops that the test wouldn't pick up cannabis after 24 hours. That's what he was told. He was actually told 12 hours, and then they said, but even at 24, absolutely not. So he just sucked that up, said, yep, no problem. And immediately people were getting pinged, driving the next day after 24 hours, and they did nothing about it. And if you actually read the second reading speech of Eric Roosendahl when he brought this in, he doesn't mention cannabis. He doesn't mention cannabis. He just ignores cannabis, doesn't mention this issue. And of course, this all happened before medicinal cannabis was legalised. So you would think that when you legalise, you've got your health department saying there's federal legislation, we're going to act to legalise and administer medicinal cannabis in New South Wales as well. We better update our other laws, and they just didn't do it. So it really does show that the tragedy when you get close to government and the heart of government is that either there's people not paying attention or idiots in control. And so that's the real tragedy. It's not some grand conspiracy. There's just a whole heap of people fucking up. And it's our job to remind them about what's going on. And so I hope we can do that. And certainly that conflict of interest is outrageous.
And look, David's wants to respond as well. I have looked as far as I can and as deeply as I can into the allegation that the drug testing is owned by police or ex-police, and or it is owned by the police superannuation, and I've never been able to find one iota of evidence to support that contention. Now, if there is some evidence out there, please give it to me, because we'll do something with it. I'm sure every parliamentarian here would love to speak to that in Parliament, but I've not seen it yet. David?
Yeah, can I just pick up on that point? I mean, we, in terms of trying to skin the cat of impairment versus presence, we thought we should approach this from two angles. So one is actually driving reform, but the other one is workplace drug testing, because it's exactly the same issues, it's the same misnomers, it's the same stigma. And that was interesting at two levels, I think. One was the whole industry of drug testing came out. So there was the usual sort of crazy Christians from Drug Free Australia and DECA who just actually said to us, we want you to oppose the introduction of medicinal cannabis. That's how up to date they were. But that was interesting because there was clearly a lot of money, and it's a big business testing drugs, and we need to fight that. The second one that was really good though, and it came out of it, and we're pursuing this at the moment, was we actually got some really interesting enlightened voices. And one of them was the Human Rights Commissioner in Victoria, who recommended an amendment to the Equal Opportunity Act to make it discriminatory or to make it an offence to discriminate against someone because they're taking a prescription medication or they're undergoing a course of medical treatment. Now, we took that into the House via a private members bill a couple of weeks ago, and the government opposed it. Surprise, surprise, that's their policy. But we are still hopeful, because there are other bills coming up, which will strike to the Equal Opportunity Act, that we will be able to attach this to an amendment and possibly get it through. Because if you think about it, if you can get to the situation where it is discrimination against taking a prescription medication or undergoing a course of medication, it's not only central to what we're pushing, but it's also right across people who need medication for a raft of issues, and all of whom are stigmatised or discriminated against.
We've got one more question here.
Yeah, look, guys, my question is how fundamentally do we try and stop the police and aiming for the lowest hanging apples, and instead of them being allowed to dictate their budgets, formulate a proposal of an external body that can, in terms of public opinion, influence what the police spend their budgets on, instead of them being allowed to dictate to us.
It's a really good point. It's been raised before, and I think it's worth raising every time. In New South Wales, we used to have a police board, which was nominated by by Parliament, members of the public, a broad range that set policing priorities. Currently, their budget is a single number. Here's the money. You use your discretion as you wish. And that is how things get out of whack with community expectations. Who in this community believes there should be 1,000 convictions for sexual assault and 10,000 for possession of prohibited drugs? Not many people would like that level of priority, I would have thought. It's a great point. Thank you. You wanted to talk to the previous issue.
Actually, it fits with this issue as well, because I would encourage us to think differently. This is my big thing. Think differently. It's not really about testing for drugs. Roadside drug testing is not really the big issue. The big issue is that we are, first of all, being tested against our human rights, and secondly, that police are currently, with the legislation they currently have, they are permitted, allowed, given the discretion, to allow multiple peoples to drive while impaired and remain undetected, putting everyone's lives and health at risk. So the current system is actually one of encouraging driving while impaired. It's not about the drugs, it's about the presence of impairment. Now, if you've got a double shift to do as a nurse and you're driving back home exhausted after a double shift, you have got around about the same accident risk as 0.08 alcohol, and yet it will not be detected. And I haven't got police on the roads to see who is driving improperly. If you had a fight with your significant other and you haven't had a proper sleep, you are going to be impaired. If you are taking certain prescribed medication and you're not aware that it's impairing you, then you're going to be driving while impaired, and it is not detected. So we actually have a human rights situation. Every single one of us, our human right to drive on the roads without having impaired drivers coming the other way is being assaulted on a daily basis. And we are letting that happen because we're focusing just on drugs, we're focusing just actually on cannabis, as if that was any importance. The importance is that we are being assaulted by the legislation which is unfairly targeting us while letting those who do need to be taken off the road drive onwards, putting us at risk.
I just wanted to pick up on the discussion just before about the cops. And this is it's a tiny bit of a tangent, but I think quite important in the whole kind of roadside drug testing reform movement, if you like, is what troubles me is just how much the police in New South Wales have been given so much power, so many resources, post-Bondi. Oh, it's not a matter of that, gee, the cops weren't to blame. We'll give them more powers, we'll give them more resources. We'll take...
We actually have the real Sue here.
Hello.
I was good. No, I was you.
Oh my God, David was me.
Yeah.
That's
Kate,
nice
sorry to
too. So post-Bondi, we'll take all these, and Sue Higginson can totally speak to this, but we'll take all of these rights away from people and give the police more powers. We've got there was supposed to be this new regime in New South Wales, which is called the Early Drug Diversion Initiative, which was all about if people were caught with drugs, similar to the cannabis cautioning scheme, the idea is that, we clog our courts up so much with these ridiculous charges for people who are caught with a joint or a bag of coke or something. So let's try and get them help. Let's send them this way. Let's divert them from the courts. Guess what? It's not working because the police want to still send not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people a year to the courts. And because the laws make it a little bit tougher for the police sometimes if people, for example, have prior convictions, which you would think, it's not unreasonable to suspect a fair few people are caught on the streets with drugs in their pockets may have prior convictions, then they're sent to court. So, and the sniffer dog situation. So we can reform the laws. We're going to. It's really important for medicinal cannabis patients, 100%, and it's a priority. But it cannot stop there. And what we are doing in the Parliament every day is fighting what is frankly an increasingly fascist government that is like just handing these powers to the police and not being apologetic. And when we look at what's happening across the world, that is really, really, really frightening. So we need to be, yes, this is important, but I worry where it's all going to go next. Because of the swing to the right, because of what's happening globally, it has to be part of a broader fight. And I know probably everybody in this room is part of that broader fight, but we can't stop. If we've got this law change, let's see, if it happens this year, we've got a hell of a lot more to keep fighting about. And the number one thing for me is to remove criminal penalties for drug use, any drug, remove criminal penalties, and then let's go from there in terms of regulated supply.
Yes, of course you can.
Hey guys, I love that. So,
excuse me, we got other questions.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
yeah.
Can we come straight back to you? Go on, we're going to come straight back to you. We are. One more question, and I know.
I just wanted to ask about the legislation debate coming up in the New South Wales Parliament regarding the driving. Do we know when that will be, and when is the rally organised for outside Parliament where we will stop traffic on Macquarie Street? And if there isn't a rally being organised, why not, so that I can organise one?
Fantastic. Okay, who wants to lead? We'll go to Bucko. Come on. We'll come back.
Because well, I don't think a rally stopping traffic may be counterproductive. You've got to. It's a big process to get like with the new laws to get your protest approved. I would expect.
Yeah.
Well, I would expect legislation in the New South Wales Parliament in the next month. That's what we're expecting, to see legislation in the next month and it voted on. And let's not forget, the Premier has said he's going to do it. He said that in meetings with me 3 times. He's going to do it, and I believe it. I don't think, a lot of people oppose everything Chris Minns is doing. They don't like Chris Minns, but on this issue, he has been very strong. And I don't believe that the Conservative press is lined up against us as forcefully as some people have suggested. 2GB, I don't think anyone listens to Murdoch anymore. Chris Minns certainly listens a lot to 2GB and Ben Fordham. He's still a very powerful shock jock in this country. Ben Fordham is on board with roadside drug testing reform. He has publicly said it again and again. I've been on his program 3 times where he has backed us in. He's a friend of the Lambert family who backed the Lambert initiative that started up the biggest cannabis research facility in the country. So, and he's got friends who, and that's it. There's only one horse in this race, and it's self-interest. And that's why I don't think the Conservatives are really out there screaming about this as much as they could be, because they've got family members with cancer, with MS, with anxiety. They're all on it. Half of the New South Wales Parliament is on it. Don't worry about it. They all come up to me and say, come and try my new gummies. Have you seen this vape? What about this? Where do I get on it? And there's a reason I think that Chris Minns is surviving on the job. I reckon there's a fair chance he's probably got a prescription himself.
I reckon he's
and he's worried about what happens when he's not being driven around in the Comcar. So, yeah.
One thing I would say in response as well is there should be a protest. There should be people on the street. Because you've heard it, right? How sick has politics become where it's about what mates you've got and the self-interest? Politics was always meant to be about people power. And it's time we take our fucking power back. And we take our power back on the streets. And yes, we know who's got friends and they can keep being friends. But at the end of the day, it's about taking the power back. And you heard what Cate said. It's not just about cannabis reform, is it, friends? It's about ending native forest logging. It's about all of the justice issues. It's about stopping the war right now that Chris Minns has perpetrated on black kids in New South Wales. There are more black kids in prison right now than there ever has been in New South Wales history. Do we care as a movement about drug law reform, about keeping kids out of prison, and about protecting our forests? Are we one movement, and are we part of actually getting some people power back into politics, or do you want to leave it to Pauline Hanson? That's what it's about, friends. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just checking. Okay, more questions. Go for it.
When's the rally?
Totally. Oh, and if you do want to organise a rally, literally on Friday, we had a workers' rally outside on Macquarie Street, and it was fantastic. They shut down the whole of Macquarie Street. And if we stop doing that, then people in that place think only the friends are listening and the people don't have the power. We know we've got the power, but we have to exercise that power together. That's what politics is about, and that's what we all have to do together. Another question. Someone's got one, I know you have. Yes.
Just following
Cate.
your pieces, or I'm not into politics, but an issue I have seen and faced, and just met someone who experienced a different version of drugging from the authorities, from the police, following up an incident that isn't warranted. So gassing in the back of a vehicle which has chemicals in there, and the unwarranted jabbing. So things like cybercillin and cannabis plants, also fungi, for the ground plants. And then you've got authorities unequipped for medical intervention.
We are talking about a specific topic there.
Yeah, so we're talking about the police and human rights. So we're very on topic here.
In terms of police right now in New South Wales,
yeah, sorry,
we are
I'm not
literally
finished
handing
yet.
them
Sorry,
powers.
I'm
We
not
are
finished
handing
yet.
them powers.
So they jab you with even further chemicals that could have any sort of reaction, and then the human is put in a position.
Sorry, can we actually move on? Because this is actually.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. I don't want to.
No, if there are clear
Let me
incidents.
know when you have 2 broken ribs because you've been jabbed.
No, I was just about to say.
Times
I was about
for
to
not
say.
relaying a partner's name.
No, I was just
in
about to
5
say.
seconds.
If there
Are we
are
the
cases, seriously, there are lawyers amongst us. You should bring them, and we should talk about them, and we should.
Police scheme. Are they allowed?
We should take responsive
No, I
action.
don't listen to someone who just had way too many topics in one spiel, and that was really hard to follow. So you
Okay,
get to,
I think stop now, please.
Okay, so you're okay with people that are having normal
You're
substance
disrupting the whole
use,
proceeding.
We want to hear from the panelists, not
Okay,
you.
but if we do want to talk about
see my
police
circus
powers,
show then, buddy. I'll show you how to maneuver.
if we do,
your-
like the police, you've seen, you heard, like
okay,
Mins
no
has
worries,
been.
darling, that's a genuine issue to be combated.
Absolutely.
You want to be jabbed with diazepam 5 times
Absolutely.
when you've just had a bit of chuff on you grown from the ground. Or
Absolutely
not
not.
even, or cybercillin.
And there are really good lawyers that would help
then
any
you opted
person
for a health
who's been the
system.
victim of that
Human
police
rights,
action.
why do the police have that authority?
They
there?
shouldn't.
That's part of
They
it.
shouldn't. Yeah. Okay, is there another question?
Not make sense.
Absolutely.
Am I? Or
What about Yeah. Who would like to have another talk on the panel? So is everyone aware we've literally got a New South Wales state election, March next year? Everyone's got it, yep. And everybody knows
I don't
what to
believe
do.
your power of the people.
Oh, well that's a shame, because it's wonderful.
I don't think you do, sweetheart.
Yes, I would absolutely love to ask a question in terms of New South Wales politics, Stephen and Jeremy. I've got a question, but I'm just very, very keen to know, can we get like any kind of a hint, because I think Stephen and Jeremy know a little bit more maybe than others do. Is it just going to be a trial? Can we expect something in New South Wales that's going to be that we're going to really like, or is it going to be a very, 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 very weakened, kind of copy of the ideal scenario in New South Wales? Your bill, my bill. Is that what we're expecting, Jez?
Oh,
really?
Legalize cannabis, yeah.
Well, what we're expecting is meaningful reform. That's what we're expecting, and that means we have to negotiate down into the details, as I say, of how the police do deal with this at the roadside. So there's one element which is providing a medical exemption for people and dealing with it like other opiates and the rest. But the thing is, they are mass screening still for illicit cannabis as well. So that they have to be able to differentiate in terms of, and they're going to continue to do that. And so the police have to have a procedure at the roadside that they can rely on. And that means there's a whole range of complexities in that we have to deal with. Do we allow people on medicinal cannabis, here we go, do we allow people on medicinal cannabis to have any blood alcohol in their system as well? Because there's an entourage effect. Like, what happens if in the police the police's opinion, they that they are prescribed, they do test positive, but the policeman believes that they are impaired. And now, what if they're they've got a neurodegenerative disorder, and so they look impaired, but they're not, and that's been the discrimination in that area. And so these are not things we can just say, oh well, that'll get sorted out. This has to be in the detail of the legislation, and as a singular issue party, that's what I am particularly interested in, the details of how it's going to operate so it works, and then we review it. So I don't think we're going to have a trial. I think we're going to have legislation that's rolled out around the state, and I think we're going to have an iterative process of saying what works, what doesn't, but we need to bring the cops with them and have a relationship with the police. And this relationship about roadside drug testing, solving that, opens the door to having a conversation with the Commissioner about reprioritising policing. And that is what I'm doing, working constructively on the details and saying to Mal Lanyon, wouldn't you be better off publicly being seen to crack down on domestic violence and violence against women in particular than chasing people with sniffer dogs for personal possession of drugs? And he agrees. So by having the conversation, building an understanding, that's how you take the cops on the journey to legalisation, not by yelling at them forever.
Hang on, we've just got one response here, and then
So
we'll
can
go.
I talk to that?
Yeah,
if you
go
don't
for
mind?
it, Steve.
So, because it was sort of aimed at me. I know there's probably people out there who think that a simple reform in this area would simply be to create a defence. If you've got a script, you can just present that script. I understand why that's attractive to some people, but the government has to also deal with the fact that on the evidence, and this is particularly so in respect to the combination of alcohol and cannabis, there is an adverse relationship in terms of road safety. Now, the government can't ignore that for a whole lot of moral and ethical reasons, but also a political reason. If we try to put through a reform that doesn't adequately deal with community safety, it's not going to last. It's not going to have the support of the community. Might have the support of a lot of people who want a simple solution that also protects their legitimate interests. But the government's got to take a holistic sort of balanced view. So what we're then talking about, in a practical sense, is what happens when you fail the saliva test, but as Jeremy said, there's a suspicion that you could be under the influence. What occurs to me, and this is done in some American states, is the technology has changed. There is now an impairment test. Be pretty sensible, I would have thought, to apply that. Now, understand that that affects people's interest in an adverse way. It's not as simple as that first solution I talked about, but we've got a situation here where we've got a test that applies to a range of drugs, then medicinal cannabis has come in, then the technology's changed. So understand what Cate's saying in terms of we don't want a trial, we don't want this, we want the progressive solution. It's a little bit easier for Cate than it is for the government, who's got to actually balance community safety and engage in the political process in a very different way. It's also different for Jeremy, who's actually a subject matter expert in a single issue party, very focused on this, working on a practical solution. So I get the rhetoric and I get the sort of throw of the question, but we've got to be reasonable and evidence-based and proper about this, not least because if we're not, it's not going to last. It's not going to last.
Okay, I've just got one last comment on this, and then we'll go straight to the next question.
Very short. Look, the Legalised Cannabis Party is actually, I think, a broad church, and I disagree with one part of what Jez has said. We're not a single-issue party, actually, at least not in WA. And secondly, the difference between recreational cannabis and medicinal cannabis is zero. It's dosing and the scientific way you're doing it, but the plant is the plant is the plant. Why we should allow the police to differentiate between their opinion, is this actually illicitly grown or is this actually with a script? Well, basically, fuck off.
I tend to agree. Question. Yes.
Yeah, I think the medical prescription side is sort of like a poison chalice. It'll come back and bite people on the bum because in the time of AI and data breaches, all your information will be used against us. and absolutely. The other thing is, I just don't know why people plead guilty. I know it's easy to plead guilty, but in all my activist stages, I've never pleaded guilty to anything, and I've always got off much better than all the people that plead guilty.
Yeah.
So I think also, why isn't this in the High Court? There's at least 10 reasons why this is just such bullshit scientifically, business-wise, ethics-wise. It just goes on. Why isn't this in the High Court? And why the High Court judges that would vote against it once it got there should be shamed for the rest of their historic life.
So it's not in the High Court because we don't have a constitutional Bill of Rights like in Canada, where the Canadian
people get all
Supreme Court
sorts of
used
tips
those.
to the High Court.
So,
but
not on this
fight
because
this against the High
there's no
Court.
constitutional rule that you can use to strike down the law. That's my view.
I also just wanted to
support the sentiment.
talk about the fact that your comment in relation to prescription versus recreational, and the prescription may prove to come back to haunt us at some stage. I think that is potentially has some weight. However, I am extremely concerned about legislation that treats medicinal cannabis as different again to every single other prescription drug by saying you can't have any alcohol in your system. So if I choose to take oil for THC for anxiety or something, and I'm taking it every day, does that mean I can't have a beer or a glass of wine? Like in terms of driving, that is incredibly.
The doctor would say don't do that.
Yeah, no mixing at all.
No mixing. Like a lot of medicines, the doctor says don't drink on this medicine.
Yes, but in terms of making it illegal, I'm talking about.
I could drive
You've
with
got
one
like
glass of
every
wine
single
without it
prescription
right
drug, even if you drove with Endone,
Exactly.
you're not going to lose your license over it unless you're impaired. That's what I'm saying.
There's one option that the police do have, and they don't necessarily have to convict you for something. They can give you what's called a cease to drive order. They can say to you, look, I'm unsure if you're impaired or not. I don't have the technology here, or an app, or a psychiatry. I'm not a doctor of psychiatry. I can't work out if you're impaired. So I'm going to err, and you don't. You've failed the test. You're above, say, a certain threshold. They give you a cease to drive order. And so they can just say, you shouldn't drive for the next 24 hours. So that's an option that I think is on the table as part of it. So rather than say to someone who is above a certain threshold in terms of, say, a saliva test, they then say to them, we're not going to arrest you, you're not going to be charged with anything, but you get a cease to drive order. Which you
shouldn't drive or you can't drive?
You can't drive.
On what ground?
On the fact that you may be...
Police discretion.
No,
An
impairment test.
Keep the impairment test.
Yeah, like an impairment test, a threshold test, potentially a saliva test of a certain level of THC in your system. You're over a limit, and the police officer believes also, that you don't seem cognitively, like you might have been driving erratically or doing something, against that causes them concern, and they give you a cease to drive order.
Okay, we've got another
So
question.
there's other options that are about the detail of all the different options that the police may have, and how they want to that they have to deal with this, at roadsides. And then there's the other thing: do you do it the same in every place? Because some places, if you give someone a cease to drive order, that person can get on a bus or call an Uber or ring a friend. But if you're at the back of Kyogle, do the police at Mike May then have a duty of care to take that person that they've said you can't drive for 24 hours to wherever they need to be? That then needs police resourcing.
Okay.
So these are the details of a complex piece of legislation and a road, and like the key step we need, let's not forget this, this is the key step on the road to legalisation. Once we have this operating, we essentially open the door to a conversation about ending prohibition.
Okay, we are running out of time. We've got 2 more questions, and I think Duncan.
We've got another 20 minutes.
Okay, there you go. Halpern, you were wrong. Okay, off we go. Please go. Your question.
My question. Okay. I'm noticing that in the panel here there isn't any Queensland people. I'm from Queensland, and I'm wondering. Yeah. So I was wondering if what you guys think about what us Queenslanders can do better, at least campaigning wise and stuff, and just in general, any thoughts and comments about Queensland's stand in this?
You need to get Christopher out of the fucking government.
Oh my
But-
fucking god! Don't even start.
But Queensland is in a very unique position where it doesn't have an upper house compared to other state branches of government, which means that often niche parties like the legalized cannabis party or even like the sex or pirate parties and stuff like that, yes, they get a 10% or 15% vote across the state, which would mean that usually they could get an upper house seat and then have advocates and push from there, but that's not enough to win a lower house seat. So the biggest issue I think that Queenslanders face, especially as grassroots and community members such as yourselves trying to get involved, is that you are really, really forced to join a party to make any kind of change, and it has to be, unfortunately, one of the parties that gets enough votes to get lower house members.
The Greens has one. You know, we've got Maiwa, and we did have another seat, and we will fight hard to get it back.
So you know, join the political party of your choosing, but you need to join a broader party, unfortunately, that can encapsulate a large enough vote to win over a majority of your community, rather than, unfortunately, a party that is focused on incredibly important, but maybe not as popular for your local community sort of issues, unfortunately. However, I'm sure if Nimbin had its own electorate, they could get a lower house seat for a legalised cannabis member.
As somebody that grew up in Queensland, in the Lockyer Valley, and went to university at Griffith Uni, and lived in Brisbane in the 90s, and had police, you know, raid our fucking share house like a couple of times. So I know. So Queensland is kind of almost back there. We know that they've just ditched pill testing as well, which is incredibly tragic. So I will echo what Sue has said. The Greens are very strong in Queensland. We've got a lot of members. We've got a lot of momentum. We've got a lower house MP. We've got the one house. We've got an MP in the Queensland Parliament as well as one in the federal. They're based lower and anyway, so it's we're good. We are good. So I in terms of having to join a party that can win in Parliament, I also don't agree with that. I think joining parties, even if they don't have a chance potentially to win a seat, is still a very good thing, and that's really what the Greens were doing for like 20 years until we broke through, and hopefully we're going to get more seats at the next elections coming up.
And alternatively, you can move to New South Wales. We love you. You're welcome. You can be here. Half of Brisbane during the Joe Bialke-Peterson days moved to Kyogle, and we're all still there. There's a big community, a big family. You are welcome. I know Duncan
Can I just say, as a Queensland refugee from 35 years ago, after a dozen arrests at the hands of the Queensland Wallopers, I guess I'd say, look, you know, I feel your pain, but I'd also make the point that there's more to politics than parties, and there's more to parties than parliaments, and what I know we're debating very actively in legalised cannabis, but also it's relevant for all of us, is yes, you can have certain parliamentary roads, and whether you set it at 100% and then, or whether you take a more pragmatic road, as we've taken, I suppose, in a parliamentary setting, that's one option. But at the end of the day, in Queensland, it was always about mass movements. It's about people putting their asses on the line, organising, getting out there, forcing issues, embarrassing governments, you know, and just challenging the police. And in the absence of an upper house where you can get those numbers, that mass organisation becomes absolutely critical. And I think certainly for legalised cannabis, I mean, having members of parliament is a very new thing. But in getting into parliament, we have built on decades and decades and decades of advocates and consumers and campaigners who have kept this issue alive. And it would be a very, very bad mistake if we imagined we could turn off the mass movement and rely on Parliament to get an outcome.
And you know, we talk so much. I'm going to go to you in a sec, Duncan. We talk so much about what we've lost in terms of the movement from where we began, and it is about connection, and it is about reconnecting with each other in the movement and rekindling that connection at every level we can, because David's right. Like, we are a movement, and that's why I was trying to impart immediately. It's like, we are not just here to legalise cannabis. This is about oppression. It is about suppressing good things from happening because of other interests. And when we connect, whatever that connection is through, whether it is because we can't stand what's happening in Gaza, we can't stand what's happening in New South Wales prisons right now, we can't stand anymore what's happening in our forests, and we can't stand seeing our mate persecuted through the fucking courts because they don't want to not have a joint on Friday night and get in the car at 4 a.m. and go to work on Saturday morning, you know? That is what we're fighting against. We must remember, we are not individuals, we are part of a community, we're connected, and we must stay connected because we are a movement. Duncan.
Thank you. Just returning to the RDT impairment question. It seems to me that part of this is about the presence versus an allowable limit. Because, you know, okay, so say you had a bit of oil one day, the next day you had a drink, right? And you get pulled over. Okay, you test under the limit for alcohol. But an RDT shows that there's presence of THC. So surely at that point, the presence of THC, if it's under a certain level, isn't going to cause impairment. And so this, it seems to me that this comes back to the question of presence versus an allowable limit.
Go, David.
Yeah, can I say, look, I really, really, really wish that was the case. But I think all of the science, and this is our ultimate confounder. You can have people who are long-term consumers who can take in a massive amount of THC and will demonstrate negligible impairment. And I suspect there's quite a few of them, yeah, including myself. There will be novel consumers who take in tiny amounts and experience an enormous amount of impairment. And so it's not, and what we've seen is, even in progressive, like Northern European countries, you know, who've tried to work this through, in the end they've resorted to a notional blood reading, knowing that it is of very limited use. And unfortunately, the question of how do we actually assess impairment remains the holy grail. And in part, that's because, and I think it's been alluded to by a few speakers, I know David was talking about it before, we all have impairments. You know, we all have, I've had multiple back surgeries. I close my eyes, I can't stand up straight. Now, you know, that's, and so if I could be absolutely clean, a rare event, but, and I would fail, unless there's a baseline test and then a similar testing methodology for when I'm actually picked up. And currently none of that exists. And that's part of the challenge
How do you reckon,
the scientific front.
how do you reckon Donald Trump would go if he was tested for impairment? Just wondering. Like, seriously, I mean, it's a real question, right? What is, you know, impairment? Okay, yes, down the back. I know you had your hand up, and then we'll come straight to you. Oh, apologies. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, to me it seems a bit kind of like a bi-directional thing. Like you either go ahead and police all of the possible drugs that you could possibly be on and get a detectable level for those and a level of impairment. And there's a serious equity issue in not doing it to all drugs. Like I'm a good example. I got run into by someone who had a heroin needle under their front seat that had detectable levels of opiates in their system. No drug driving charges. The reason I'm on medical cannabis for the neuropathic pain that accident caused me. And I've lost my licence for a whole year.
Yeah, yeah. The inequity, that's what Cate was saying, exactly that issue. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there is a, that
the
is,
only factor that the only thing that we can really do is go back on what we've done, because otherwise we're going to have to go forward on every single medication, because there's a whole bunch of you can have a buprenorphine, you can have your methadone, you can have 2 Valiums, a beer, have shot up last night, have Rohypnol in your system, and you sleep.
yeah, it's a really, really good point, and it's actually a point of leverage that we have, which is we can say, well, if you're going to do this and maintain this system, then apply it like equitably. Do it with all pharmaceuticals. And the people who don't want us to do that is the pharmaceutical industry. They go, okay, all right. With that, they've been holding cannabis at bay because of probably market share and a bias against cannabis as a medicine, especially in the medical profession. But that's changing. So that's our next argument. If you don't do it, okay, then apply it. And they do in the workplace. This is the thing. In the workplace, they test for all these prescription medicines. If you're operating heavy machinery, you're flying an aeroplane, you're in the cops, you're an AMBO, you're a bus driver, they do. Like I was a bus driver for 3 years. I had a urine test all the time, and I couldn't have blood alcohol above 0.01. I couldn't have SSRIs. I couldn't have cannabis. All these things. Now they can test for that. It's very easy for the cops to do. We don't do it because the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want us to. And so if they don't go forward, then we fall back onto that. And I think that's a big point of leverage.
Okay, Stephen's going to contribute, and then we're going to come to you.
So I think that's a really excellent question, and I'm reminded, because I live in Dubbo, of a guy called Kevin Saul, whose son was killed in a car accident in Dubbo, and it actually led to part of this regime. And I used to talk to Kevin a lot. He's passed away now, and he used to always say to me when I talked about cannabis and how all these other prescription drugs are not subject to the regime, he used to always say to me, but it's illegal, but it's illegal. And we go around in circles with this argument, and the point that I want to make is there's a whole lot of evidence-based issues here, but there's a political issue here as well. And if we think that we can just go to a regime where we treat cannabis exactly like Valium, and if you've got the prescription, and if you're not falling over and you don't immediately commit drug under the influence, and that's the proper way to do it, I just want to say politically, it's not going to wash, it's not going to last. We need to get to something here that balances all of these things, is meaningful reform, as Jeremy's talking about, but is not so kind of pure and equitable between these different drugs that we go nowhere. And Kevin's words just ring in my ears, but it's illegal, but it's illegal. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but a lot of people are going to have that response.
And it does. It reminds me of when I was a very young law student and found out that actually all laws are bullshit and just constructs of moral outrage, moral panic, and a reflection of the politicians who made them, right? Okay, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that notion of impairment is something that grabs me. I mean, when we talk about impairment, we're talking about, some mythical evenness that we all, some standard that we all have. Shouldn't it be about some sort of digital test or something to prove that you're capable of driving? It shouldn't matter what you've had. It's in that moment, are you able to show, do you have the reaction times or something? So I don't know, can I not envisage a digital testing, like an iPad put on the lap of a person and they can, do timings in the same way that correlates with a driving test? That seems a really easier pathway for me to show the person safe to drive.
I think in the world of AI and technological changes, we'll probably get there, but maybe in 100 years, not sure.
Oh, hang on.
Testing, impairment testing actually is the problem, because getting a test which gives a number, this is the difficult thing. So there are things which are coming on that are computerized, they look at eye movement in a simulated driving experience. You could do that. It costs money, it's not available as a mobile thing, so it has to be taken back. So it's going to cost time, effort, and indeed money. But that's the way to go forward. You're right, we should be testing the impairment in a real driving situation.
That'd be a rational and reasonable, science-based thing to do, and I think that will come. And if someone does invent that, they will be a trillionaire. Because the application of that goes beyond drugs. And if you wanted to make roads, if you didn't care about politics, and you just wanted to make roads safer, you would reform older people driving. The most dangerous thing on our roads, apart from alcohol, is older people.
And Queenslanders.
Well, that's a really serious issue. It's the third rail of road safety. No one will talk about it or do anything about it, even though a lot of accidents, especially in the region, involve older people because of cognitive decline and other issues, lower reaction times, and we don't move to a system of more testing of older people driving because they're politically so powerful.
Imagine
and so if it was just a reasonable, rational approach, then that we would do that. And so we operate in a political paradigm where politicians are guided by self-interest and getting re-elected. And so and they wouldn't apply because a lot of older people wouldn't pass.
Imagine if we had more Greens in Parliament and we were taxing billionaires properly and we got enough money to develop this technology next week. Imagine. Okay, down here.
A lot of people wouldn't pass in general though. You'd have to be very well. Hopeless drivers.
Okay, hang on. We've got a woman here with a question. Oh, sorry, you first and then this lady. Yeah, woman.
We're losing control.
No, we love it.
I've heard a number of people mention Gaza and various other world issues.
Yes.
And that's really where I'm going. I'm doing a film called Vision 2030 Revolution Rising. So actually a real plan with timelines. By 2030 we've sorted it out. We haven't got endless trillions of dollars going to bomb innocent civilians and all the other things. Cannabis is obviously a very significant issue, but all of the things that are wrong about the world can be restored. Please come to me if you've got any interest in fixing it.
I love this. I hope you've joined the Greens. Okay.
All right, so this is like the last 5 minutes.
Okay, here we go. Question.
So,
Thank you.
Hi, could you please comment on the repercussions for things like compulsory third party and vehicle insurance, etc. If you do something stupid on the road and you're not impaired, you're covered by those things. But if you've still got presence of THC in your system, what are the repercussions for that legally?
Well, that's a really good question because the New South Wales government just brought in mandatory blood testing for anyone. They've got legislation that's sitting there. So if you're in an accident and any participant in an accident where someone dies, it's mandatory blood testing for everyone, even the victims of it. They brought in legislation which meant there was mandatory blood testing for just grievous bodily harm. So just seriously impacted. The reason that legislation is stuck there is because it's going to pick up all kinds of pharmaceuticals. Yeah. It won't just be in accidents, like in a couple hundred in New South Wales fatal road accidents. It'll be in tens of thousands of road accidents. And so they're stuck because it's going to catch medicinal cannabis and it's going to catch all those people are after their head on opiates and SSRIs and all the other things that go around. So it's an incredibly important issue. You lose everything. You're not insured.
Quickly, in a previous discussion on the subject,
I want to say on this because it's a really important one. I mentioned before, and Rachel Payne, my colleague, is up the back there. I mean, one of the things we're fighting around is this question of discrimination based on taking prescription medication or undergoing a medical treatment, and that really, so if we look at our nub issues, it's that as a question of discrimination, and then there is also, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be, I'll let my colleagues' ageist comments pass as one who's fast approaching 70, but can I just say, we shouldn't be talking about testing for alcohol, we shouldn't be talking about testing for drugs, we should be talking about testing purely for impairment. The problem is we just don't have that technology at this point in time, and in the interim, people shouldn't be screwed because they take their medication.
Here's the former magistrate.
You need to look very carefully at your own insurance policy. For example, NRMA has no barrier to, if you're sitting in a car and someone T-bones you and you then put in a claim for your insurance, if you're with Amy and you're a medicinal cannabis user, you've got a problem because there is an exclusion for having any detectable level of illicit drugs in your system, and they classify cannabis as an illicit drug even though you might be using it as a prescription. Same as Parliament does. However, there are other policies, NRMA for example, that don't specify an exclusion for that drug. So you actually need, that means for your, I'm only talking about your additional insurance, comprehensive insurance. So you really need to look carefully at your insurance policy and choose a insurance that will cover you if you're a medicinal cannabis user, and many do, and some don't. I've got a paper on this, and you can just Google me on that issue, and you'll see it.
And what about seeking?
We should start our own insurance company, folks. Yes.
Right, so just like wrapping up statements from the panel, if possible.
Absolutely. Jeremy, over to you. Wrap it up.
1 minute each.
Wrap it up. All left.
Reform is possible. It's always difficult. It's like drilling through a board. You don't feel like you're going anywhere, then you bust through, and then you move on to the next board. We have to show, we're a young, new party, that we can get across the detail, work with in the existing world. We don't have a blank canvas. We're coming into this with medicinal cannabis legalised, with the RDT laws in place, and with conservative governments who have got competing interests. The New South Wales Police Force, I say this again and again, one of, if not the most powerful political unit in this state. They can tear down a government, they can tear down a premier, they can tear down a minister, they can tear down their own commissioner. They do it again and again and again, and we have to listen to them and say, what are your concerns, and hope that they act reasonably. That's what we're doing, because these are the people that we have to convince to give up the war, to down the tools, that we can overwhelm them in a mass movement. There's no doubt about it, but we can conciliate, build consensus, and move on. And that's the approach that I'm taking at the moment. While, there is a big mass movement going on, don't worry, and beyond Nimbin, and that is all the middle class people in the suburbs and regions of Australia who are now on medicinal cannabis. And they are now an ally in this, an increasingly powerful part, a silent ally. They don't get out and they don't go to rallies like this and all the rest, but medicinal cannabis has saved their lives, and that's why we're not seeing on the front page of the telly, because they are a very powerful political force. Anyway,
I guess I'd say, look, we achieved some changes on Medcan driving in Victoria, and it was premised on two principles. One, the right of the judiciary, or the magistracy, to actually make a call and to basically say, in the absence of impairment, if it's a medicine, and you don't get penalised. That was a big win. The stalking horse there, in this as in so many issues, is Medcan. And so I'll probably just leave you with one thought. If we build campaigns around the sanctity of the relationship between the doctor and the patient, how do we as a group of activists deal with people who have come into the Medcan sector purely as a cash flow business, who do not give a fuck about the cause of cannabis, who do not give a fuck about the question of patients' rights, who are just there and they are shoveling out Medcan, and the shit is going to hit the fan, whether it's from the TGA or whether it's from accidents on the roads or whatever. And I think as a group, one of the things we need to think about is what is the necessary reform or controls that need to apply to the Medcan industry.
So when I sat on the cannabis inquiry with Jeremy, and we heard evidence that jurisdictions who've introduced the defence of medicinal cannabis have had no change in terms of road safety outcomes, so no greater level of harm, I was reminded of something that I'm reminded of often in the Parliament, which is there's not the relationship between the coercive laws of the state and human behaviour that we often think there is. The main drivers of good social outcomes is the fundamental decency and good sense of people. There's a lot of exceptions to that, but we need to look at policies, look at measures that bring out the best in people. I think in medicinal cannabis, basically, and driving, it's the advice of doctors. It's people getting medical advice and making proper decisions. So that decency, that common sense of the community is what drives the possibility of so much social change like Sue's been talking about. There's a whole lot of issues out there, so thank you for being here, thank you for your activism. We can make a better world together.
Education.
Yep.
it's easy to say that Parliament doesn't matter and politics doesn't matter, but unfortunately the reality is the buck does stop at the Parliament House. That's where change is made, and mass movements are impotent unless they can get into that house. And we're seeing a mass movement now. I apologise for my Queensland friends, but there has been a mass movement against young people with this vehement zeitgeist of youth crimes, and we've already seen legislation within less than a year put in that will lead to the death of a couple hundred people. With the transphobic legislation, with the anti-drug testing legislation. This will lead to deaths. These are all lives that can be saved if the mass movement mobilizes into a potent force and joins the party that they think is best fit for making that change. Now, cannabis has a home in the Labor Party because workers use cannabis to medicate from workplace injuries. They use it to relax because work fucking sucks. I need to relax after work. It's so hard. There is a home for cannabis in the Labor Party, as there is in many parties, and these are all potent forces that the mass movement needs to get behind in order to mobilise in a potent way through the parliament system.
Thank you. I do wish though that the Labor Party would just tackle the little issue of over fucking policing and giving the New South Wales Police even more power since Labor came to power with no end in sight. And sorry, I couldn't but help because yes, workers. Workers are taking cannabis, which is a very good thing and proper thing, but Chris Minns is not going to do anything about loosening the laws around cannabis legalisation anytime soon. And that's where all of you come in. As I said earlier, I think the really big focus needs to be on the fact that people continue to get persecuted for choosing to take illicit drugs. People can't seek treatment or are deterred from seeking treatment because certain drugs are illegal. And it's about time that we had drug decriminalisation in Australia. Well, let's just start with New South Wales so that people can get help when they need it, not just in terms of cannabis, but in terms of what happens in Portugal, where you can basically get treatment if you're caught with a certain drug, an illegal drug. You're able to get treatment if you need it 3 days later, but 90% of people who are caught with drugs, who use drugs, will never need help, right? They're doing it. They're doing it to enjoy it. They're doing it for spiritual reasons. They're doing it for health reasons. But it's just so important as well that we have that 10% of people who need treatment get it. So that has to be our next campaign, and the Greens will be doing that in the lead up to the state election.
Well, let's keep it simple. WA is going to lead the way. I'm an optimist, although I'm a politician. And so I'm actually very convinced there will be change. The question is how much change, but at least there's a change coming, and we can modify the changes as they appear. So this is going to happen. We're going to win. It's going to take time, and we're hoping it's going to be very, very soon. However, that isn't really what I would like to be, because we all know the drug laws are crap.
Yep.
Okay? But they're crap. The real question is, what other laws have governments put in place which are equally crap, and we're letting them just stay there? We need to be actually active as people to rise up and demand that the laws represent us, keep us safe, and do not actually favour the transnational companies which are raping our country, raping us, and leaving us to work as slaves.
It's all really respectful. It's all really admirable. Everyone on this panel, we are all working our asses off every single day for reform. My youngest daughter who was born just here, the other one just on the hill up there. I was at the first ever MardiGrass protest action year.
As a ganja fairy.
I was one of the founding ganja fairies. That's what we did, and that's what we do here. And I can guarantee it's 35 fucking years later. My youngest daughter has now said to me, Mum, your reform agenda is fucked. We're at late stage capitalism. People have lost hope. We need radical change. Chris Minns and the Labor Party in New South Wales have had 4 fucking years. They've squandered every single moment. They had all the power they needed. They had a Greens Labor majority in the New South Wales Parliament. And now I say you had your fucking chance. Vote Green at the next election. We're not here to help Labor. We're here to fucking take their seats and to give power back to the people. You are the people. This is what we do together, folks. Now is our time.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.
That's a wrap. You've been brilliant. We love you all. Remember, people, you've got to vote with your fucking heart and your feet and connect with each other.
Rally,